Hi folks, HR Funk here with number 46 in my series on law enforcement qualification course challenge videos. It finally got nice enough that I could come back out and continue this series. Now if you've not seen any of the previous videos in this series, what I'm attempting to do is to fire a law enforcement firearms qualification course from each of the 50 states for the purpose of comparing and contrasting those courses and ultimately trying to determine what I think is the best law enforcement firearms qualification course in the country. Now this series does focus on duty handgun qualifications, and in the future I might do another series on rifle and shotgun qualifications. And today's duty handgun qualification course comes to us from the state of Alaska. This Alaska course requires the officer undergoing qualification to fire 48 shots, and those 48 shots are divided into 15 different stages of fire. So a lot of stages of fire in this course. Now a lot of those stages are 2 and 3 shot stages, and a lot of them are repeated. And the repeat stages get their own number throughout the course. So that's part of the reason there are so many stages in this. In terms of scoring, the score is based on the target that is used, and the target required by this course is the USPSA target. In terms of value, shots striking in the A zone of the target receive a value of 5 points unless the shot is specifically intended as a headshot. If the shot is intended as a headshot and it strikes outside the A zone, then that shot only receives 1 point. Throughout the rest of the course, shots striking in the C zone receive a value of 4 points, and shots striking in the D zone receive a value of 1 point. So the scoring in this is a little complicated, and it does require the firearms instructor conducting the qualification to stop the shooting at 1 point and come up and score the target and then cover over the existing shot holes and then continue on with the rest of the course. So I'll do my best to comply with all of those rules as I shoot my way through this course. And now it's time to meet today's challenger. The challenger for today's Alaska course is my IWI Masada. And as you can see, I have affixed the Hilux TAC.3 to this pistol, and I just zeroed it yesterday. So this is going to be a test of not only the pistol and the shooter, but also the sight. And I'm very much looking forward to see how all three of them perform. So with all that out of the way, let's get on with this Alaska course and see how all three of us do. And here we go. This Alaska course starts out at a distance of 2 yards from the target. The shooter begins in what's described as a guard position. Now I've not been able to find a definition for the guard position, but I suspect that's a ready position. And on the signal to fire, the shooter has to fire a failure drill. That's 2 shots to the body and 1 shot to the head in a time limit of 3 seconds. This drill is then repeated, so when I'm done, I will have fired it twice for a total of 6 rounds. For stage 2, I'm back to a distance of 7 yards from the target. And here, once again, I'm performing a failure drill. This time, the shooter begins with the firearm in the holster. On the signal to fire, the shooter has to draw, fire 2 shots to the body and 1 shot to the head in a time limit of 5 seconds. The shooter then repeats that drill. So once again, when I'm done, I will have fired 6 rounds. So this is the point in the course where the instructor who's conducting the qualification has to stop the shooting and come up and score the target and then paste over the existing shot holes before the course continues. That said, of the shots that I fired, I've got 3 of the headshots that are good. This one broke the line, so that should still be good for an A hit. But I pulled my very last headshot down here into the C zone, so that's going to only be worth 1 point instead of 5. So I gave up 4 points there, and I also pulled 2 of my body shots out here into the C zone. So that's 4, 5, 6 points that I gave up in those first 2 stages. The next stage of this Alaska course is fired at a distance of 25 yards from the target. And from here, the shooter begins with the pistol in the holster. On the signal to fire, the shooter has to draw and fire 6 rounds into the body of the target in a time limit of 20 seconds. Now, the course description indicates the shooter can fire from any position, presumably standing, kneeling, or whatever. So I'll fire these from a standing position, and we'll see how it goes. And from 25 yards, I've got 4 of the 6 shots in the A zone, so those are each worth 5 points. One of them just made it out into the C zone, so that's only worth 4 points. Then I did throw one, and I don't know exactly which shot this was. They all felt pretty good, but I've got one out here in the D zone, so that one's only worth 1 point. So I gave up 4 points there and 1 point there. So from 25 yards, I gave up 5 points. And for the next stage, I'm up to a distance of 10 yards from the target. From that distance, the shooter begins with the firearm in the holster, and on the signal to fire, the shooter has to draw and fire 6 shots dominant hand only into the target, then perform a reload and fire 6 more rounds non-dominant hand only into the target, all in a time limit of 35 seconds. And that's not the greatest dominant and non-dominant hand only shooting that I ever did in my life, but this drill is fired from a distance of 10 yards, which is a little farther away than we typically see that type of an exercise fired from. Even so, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 shots in the A zone, so each of those is worth 5 points. I've got 2 shots in the C zone, so each of those is worth 4 points, and I've got 2 shots in the D zone, so each of those is worth 1 point. So doing the math on that, we've got 4, 8, 9, 10 points that I gave up on that ambidextrous exercise. For the next stage, I'm up to a distance of 7 yards from the target. From there, the shooter once again begins with the firearm in the holster. On the signal to fire, the shooter has to draw and fire 2 rounds into the body of the target in a time limit of 3 seconds. That drill is repeated 2 times, so when I'm finished with this stage, I will have fired 6 rounds. And on that drill, I managed to pull 1 shot out into the C zone, so I gave up 1 more point there. So in the end, this Alaska course ends back where it started, which is to say the 2-yard line. And from that distance of 2 yards, a total of 12 shots are fired, and these are 2 different stages, each of which is repeated twice. For the first one, the shooter begins with the firearm in the holster, and on the signal to fire, the shooter has to draw and fire 2 rounds into the body of the target in 2.5 seconds. As I said, that drill is repeated twice. And for the final stage, the shooter begins once again in the guard position, and on the signal to fire, the shooter has to fire 2 shots into the body of the target in a time limit of 1.5 seconds. Again, that final drill is repeated twice. So I'm not going to move the camera and change things all around as I'm shooting my way through these last 2 stages. I'm going to leave it here, shoot my way through the stages, then we'll take a look at the target. And all 12 of those shots are good A-zone hits. So if my calculations are correct, I gave up a total of 22 points throughout the course of shooting this Alaska qualification, which means my final score was 218 points out of a possible 240. That does meet the qualification standard, which, as you recall, was 192 points out of the possible 240, giving it once again an 80% qualification standard. And in fact, it does meet the qualification score for SWAT team members, which is 216 points or better. So for my first time out really with the TAC.3 and still getting used to the Masada, I fired the SWAT team qualification score, and I'm pretty happy about that. Now in terms of the course itself, this Alaska course is pretty challenging. It's a pretty good course as far as testing marksmanship skills, but the thing that bothers me about it, actually there's a couple of things. First off, as I've said many times, I don't like the whole numeric score that you have to calculate. I would rather just have hits in the proper area of the target count as a hit, anything out of the proper scoring area is a miss, and then you calculate the percentage. I just don't know what we gain by adding all this calculation in, other than making it more difficult for the firearms instructor who's administering the course. Especially with this course, considering that you have to stop the shooting, score the targets, cover up all the shots that were fired, and you notice I covered up my shots each time after every stage, and I did that as a convenience just to make it easier to figure out the score that I had achieved on each individual stage and then be able to total it up at the end. Also, there are a number of things that I don't see in this course that I think are significant. Now, we did see a reloading stage, we saw a dominant and non-dominant hand-only stage, we saw a long range stage, so those are all good. We did not see any kind of forced transition. We didn't see any sort of moving and shooting. We didn't see any shooting from cover, which is extremely unusual to have a qualification course where no one shoots from cover. So when I plug this into my course evaluation matrix, I don't think it's going to score as high as some other courses that I've already shot, even though, as I said, it's a pretty challenging course. Now, for just strictly improving marksmanship skills and maybe preparing someone for match shooting, this is probably a pretty good course of fire. But when your emphasis is to teach someone to prevail in a gunfight, and particularly to do so by employing whatever tactics might be necessary in that particular situation, I see a lot of things that could be added to this course to improve it. And that's the course for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, this is number 46 out of 50, so I only have 4 more courses to go before I can finally start to plug in all of the winners for my semifinal rounds and determine what I think is the best law enforcement handgun qualification course in the country. As always, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off anything you purchase from Optics Planet. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.